On October 17, 2006, water began pouring into a mine shaft owned by Uralkali in the Perm region of central Russia.
There was a call from Baumgärtner, as I remember. He said that water was flowing into the mine.
Dmitry Rybolovlev, chairman of the board of directors at Uralkali.
I offered to fly out immediately, and I was already in Berezhniki the next day.
Rybolovlev informed the regional governor, Oleg Cherkunov, about what had happened. Within several hours, Oleg Cherkunov, Dmitry Rybolovlev, and the mayor of Berezhniki, Andrei Motovilov, listened to expert opinions on the situation and went down into the mine shaft in order to evaluate the situation at the site of the accident for themselves.
We went down. We looked around. I remember having this feeling that this is probably not the last time that something like this will happen.
At that point, Rybolovlev demanded that Uralkali's specialists in management not risk any lives. A special commission formed by Uralkali to investigate the causes behind the accident met twice a day in this office. The team was led by Uralkali Deputy Director Sergei Dyakov. He hardly left the mine in the first days after the accident. At the time, it was like a war, with its own missions and its own heroes. Only in this case, the enemy was the elements. Pipe workers were on the front lines in the mine as they pumped out the salt water flowing into the mine in order to reach the breach point. On the second day after the accident, Uralkali brought in pumps, pipes, and valves from its own inventory. Whatever materials were lacking were obtained immediately, often at a premium due to the urgency of the situation. The workers experienced no shortages of equipment or materials. 5-ton pumps were brought in by vehicle, but the pipes had to be repaired practically by hand. Workers labored on their knees in waist-deep salt water.
We were pumping out the water. We pumped out a lot. Everything was flooded. The mine cart was flooded. And we pumped maybe 5 to 6 meters of water out of there. It helped reassure us that we were managing the flow of water. We just gave it a try. Come on, let's pump it out. We were all ready to stay for a second shift. We understood that this was our work and lives were on the line.
The flow of salt water would decrease and then increase again, and although the actual work site was several kilometers away from the breach, at the first sign of an increase in concentrations of hydrogen sulfide in the air, a plan to control the disaster was announced, including provisions to evacuate the workers from the mine. Sophisticated equipment to analyze gas levels provided by rescue workers allowed them to track the atmospheric concentrations in the mine of several dangerous gases, including hydrogen sulfide, in real time. Work in the mine was halted for the first time on the 19th of October. Within a day, rescue workers announced that there was no hydrogen sulfide in the air in the mine. The miners happily returned to work, and they continued working at almost record pace. On October 24th, the miners were once again evacuated. Any serious accident underground here means that everyone must come to the surface immediately. The lamps on the miners' helmets began to blink. This is an important signal to cease work in the mine and leave the shaft. Throughout the world, notifying workers of emergency situations in an operating mine shaft is a tricky problem, as radio signals can't be transmitted underground. Besides loudspeaker systems and telephones, another signal has been developed: blinking lamps on the miners' helmets. A signal causing the lights to blink is sent from a dispatcher to the miners. Namely, thanks to its innovation, a miner who can't hear either the loudspeaker system or a telephone call, either due to his remote location or the noise from the drills, can be notified of an emergency situation. Every miner knows that if his headlamp begins to blink, he should turn off his drill and leave the shaft. From a local newspaper for mine rescue workers, 11:45, Emergency Plan 45A has been put in motion, stipulating the return of workers to the surface due to an influx of salt water, accompanied by the release of hydrogen sulfide gas. 11:46, all units have been called in. 11:50, there are 471 people in the mine. 12:15, additional support from neighboring cities. 12:57, there are 219 people in the mine. 1:08, mining sectors 1 and 3 have been cleared of people. 1:25, there are 120 people in the mine. 2:10, 2 more workers have been rescued. 2:16, emergency plan 45A has been completed. Cherkunov and Rybolovlev were on the scene throughout the crisis. Information about how many workers and from which sectors had come out of the mine shaft were delivered every 30 minutes. In this office, the head of Uralkali and the governor of Perm territory spent several hours by this map, until 471 miners had returned to the surface from the shaft. All were unharmed.
During the second emergency evacuation, I was at headquarters when about 500 people were evacuated. But the feeling was extremely unpleasant. A feeling of calm didn't return to me until the last man got out of the mine.
On the 24th of October, the last ton of ore was brought out of the mine. Salt water continued to be pumped out of the mine shaft, yet the miners came to the mine every day just as they had before the accident. They wanted to work. They didn't lose hope that the mine would be saved. An evening staff meeting, October 27th. Water is flowing into the mine at 300 cubic meters per hour. Salt water continues to be pumped out, reports mine foreman Pavel Karpov. The head of the division of rescue workers, Mikhail Pestov, informed those assembled that air quality in the mine was at normal levels and that there was no hydrogen sulfide present. Another piece of hopeful news emerged. It might be possible to obtain an extremely powerful pump from an oil company, yet they would not have enough time to buy the pump. On Saturday night leading into Sunday morning, the 28th of October, the influx of water increased dramatically up to 800 and then 1200 cubic meters of water per hour. Specialists from Uralkali depart for an urgent meeting in Berezniki. A decision is made to cease pumping water out of the mine. Sergei Dyakov, deputy to the general director of Uralkali.
Early that morning, Rybolovlev called. He said, "Don't you think it's time to get our people out of there?" I don't know where that feeling came from, but he had it. It's the truth. And when I said that we're going to bring the workers out of the mine, that actually cheered him up.
On October 28th, the last miners were brought out of the mine. When Chief Engineer Eduard Smimov turned off the pumps, 76 years of history at the oldest mine in Berezniki came to an end. In October 2006, Eduard Smimov was the chief engineer for mine shaft number 1.
When I gave the command that we were all leaving, there was real distress. There were a lot of proposals. Let's drag the pump out to here, or we'll wait here, let's bring in another pump. No one wanted to admit defeat. I had to get into the cart by force and raise my voice at them. Everyone was safe. They got in and left.
Data from sensors installed in the mine to monitor the water levels showed that the flow of water into the mine continued to rise and fall. Most likely, it is the reason that in November and December, in the city of Berezniki, there were rumors that the mine was open. Pavel Karpov, head of mine shaft number 1.
I think that the decision to evacuate the mine and not allow people to work in the shaft was absolutely the correct one. Safety above all else. You never know what's going to happen, especially in a mine. Floods, explosions. It's not something that you joke about.
The equipment remained underground. Drills, self-propelling machines, pumps, conveyors, electric motors, and other equipment. Altogether, it was more than 1 billion rubles in property.
I made that decision. It was made based upon the opinions of specialists, and after I myself had been at headquarters and waited until the last man emerged during the emergency evacuation. Well, at that moment, you understand your responsibility. Accordingly, the decisions were made not to concern ourselves with the equipment, because that also would have subjected our men to risks. Without question, it's a considerable loss for the company, but from the very beginning, our main concern was that not one person fell in harm's way. I think that we fulfilled that task, because despite the fact that this was an extremely serious accident, not one person was hurt.
The last thing the emerging miners did was to return their equipment. It is a requirement, similar to punching the clock. A miner ending his shift hands in a small token with his personal number. It's almost as important as a gas mask or a lantern. One token signifies one person in the mine. In the year after the events at the mine, both Russia and the world were repeatedly shaken by news about mining accidents. In May 2007, 134 lives were lost in an accident at the Ulyanovsk mine. In September, there was another accident at a gold mine in South Africa. In Berezniki, every care was taken so that no one in the mine was injured, so that every miner came home alive and unharmed after his shift. And that's the most important outcome from the events of October 2006. Alexander Baryakh, Deputy Director of the Institute for Mining.
Unfortunately, when exploiting potassium deposits, as soon as we build a mine, there is a risk of an accident. It's a mine. The mine can collapse. We pump out the water and we continue to work. That is the death of salt and potash mines.
80 potash mines have been flooded in the world. A considerable number of those are in Germany, the country in which the potash industry was born. The potash sector of Lower Saxony is in Hanover. The mine is in Ronenberg. 30 years ago, salt water appeared in the eastern part of the mine. 2 weeks later, the mine was closed. The population was moved, but not for long. Evacuation ended and residents returned to their homes. A small number of the homes had slight cracks, but the majority of buildings were undamaged. Yet the excavated land underneath Ronenberg was never filled, much like other towns in Germany which were located over mines. The Augshtein family, residents of Stashford.
We got used to this in our youth. We knew about it from our grandparents. Today there are no mines, but we think the work which is taking place here is quite promising, and all the buildings where cracks have begun to appear have been repaired to good condition. For instance, that house over there was empty. Now there is a cafe there. We're very optimistic, and we hope that everything here will continue to improve.
Edgar Stein, resident of Stashford.
No, I'm not afraid of it. Truly, I'm not afraid. So what if there's an excavated land under the city? I think all the work now taking place here is both necessary and important.
In October 2006, Uralkali gathered leading world mining experts in order to understand what should be done further. Academics and specialists from Perm, St. Petersburg, Belarus, Germany, Canada, and Argentina came to Berezniki. Their main task was to make a prognosis for the situation. Above all, it was necessary to understand when and where collapse could take place. This would determine where a restricted zone would be established and what to do with railroads, oil pipelines, and other structures. The academics came to a decisive conclusion. Here are clips from local television from the 28th of October 2006.
We've already established a restricted zone here, where the ground could cave in either unexpectedly or over time. This zone has been delineated as a radius from the epicenter, somewhere over here, with a radius of 200 meters or 400-meter diameter.
Exactly 10 months later, on June 28, 2007, a collapse took place in this very spot. Experts believe that if the excavation that had taken place in the 1960s had been filled immediately, the accident in 2006 would never have taken place. Authorized presidential representative of the President of the Russian Federation for the Volga Federal District.
It's hard to say who's responsible right now. Someone got the idea in the 1930s to make this decision, but we can only guess why. Right now we need to consider the future, not the past, and directly address those problems which life and nature have put before us.
Extensive monitoring of the area where water had breached the mine began on the day of the accident. Academics did not hide the fact that a serious depression of the soil or its complete collapse could take place. Nearly a kilometer of the National Railroad fell within the restricted zone. On October 24th, the regional governor, Oleg Cherkunov, led a meeting of the Commission on Emergency Situations for Perm territory and instructed emergency workers and railroad experts to develop all possible contingencies to protect passengers and, in particular, cargo shipments. In the first days after the accident, the speed limit for rail travel through the restricted zone was reduced to 25 kilometers per hour. A special position was established to monitor the condition of the railroad bed. Thanks to the warm weather in the fall of the previous year, waterways were navigable for 2 more weeks, so that companies could continue to ship products and move necessary materials along the Kama River. But the leadership of the region, city, and local enterprises understood that this would not fix the problem. In the interests of safety, passenger travel through the restricted zone ceased, and the last stop for trains going further north into the region was in Berezniki. Igor Barinov, head of the Sverdlovsk railroad line for the Perm government.
I understand that this was an unpopular step to take, but we simply didn't have the right to risk people's lives.
Mine surveyors take measurements every day on this section of the railroad to determine whether the soil is settling further and at what speed. Railroad workers receive information every hour about the seismological indicators in the restricted zone. Vladimir Trenogin, head of the 1st Fire Department Division for Emergency Situations in Perm region.
Probably one of the most important conclusions from the time when the accident took place is that we managed to avoid panic in both the city and in business, to show that both the lives of city residents and work for the companies was secure. It wasn't an easy test, either for the workers or for the management, but it is most likely the key conclusion of the difficult work we did over that year.
It would seem that it was a small price to pay, less than a kilometer of railroad tracks, but it's terrible even to think about what could have happened without the reserve railroad lines. In order to build 2 power stations, Uralkali took out millions in loans and then built several power plants over a period of several years. An electric station was set to be completed near the flooded mine in the beginning of 2007, but the power station turned out to be in the path of a backup railroad line. In November 2006, the power unit had to be dismantled, and the foundations were removed. Now, the power unit is being built again in a different location. Dmitry Rybolovlev, Chairman of the Board of Directors for Uralkali.
Well, it was a pity, right? Of course, the company is losing around $7 million in dismantling and then rebuilding the station. But that's not the issue, is it? Because you're already approaching this process of the disaster in different terms. First, I've already said that the most important thing is preserving human life. But when a company's market capitalization falls by $1 billion, you start to look at things a little bit differently.
Despite rumors to the contrary, Uralkali received no insurance payouts and could not have received any.
Insurance companies don't cover work underground. Canadian companies, American companies also don't have insurance for constructing mine shafts and so on, because everyone understands perfectly well that this is a sector with heightened risk, and no one wants to take that kind of risk on himself.
The closure of the mine threatened to halt the production of metallic components in Berezniki, as the carnallite for the factory was only produced in the mine where the accident took place. Several thousand people could have been put out of work. In a matter of days, a Visma filial and 2 competitors, Uralkali and Silvinit, agreed to deliver carnallite ore from the city of Solikamsk and refine it in Berezniki. Silvinit did not have the ability to increase production of enriched carnallite. Metal workers and other employees had to adjust to the new work, but the acting director of Avisma, Vladimir Tankeyev, said that this was only a side thought. Vladimir Tankeyev, acting director of a subsidiary of Avisma.
A terrible thing happened, right? It has been shown time and again. What's important is how people overcome that misfortune. They can fall into a panic, flee the city, give in to fear. Or there's the second kind of people, like in this case, who are more put together and deal with the problem. That's the most important thing. Not just to talk about it, but to solve problems. People from this city solve their problems, and it's a difficult task.
Immediately after the disaster, academics explained that as time passed, more fresh water would begin to flow in the mine, slowly dissolving the salt. This process is unavoidable and is actually useful. The cushion of water underground would slow the speed at which the oil sank. But the slower the rate at which the process of dissolving the salt takes place, the better. And the one thing that can be done to help the process is to inject salt water into the mine shaft. The accident at the mine quickly came to the attention of federal authorities. In the end of October, a federal commission began to investigate the accident. Representatives for the Ministry of Natural Resources came to Berezniki on multiple occasions. In January, a government commission was established by the Russian president. At that time, the committee was headed by the Minister for Emergency Situations, Sergei, who came to Berezniki at the end of January. Shoigu ordered that a protective dam be constructed immediately. The dam was constructed in 2 months. From here, we have a good view of the sinkhole. If the water from the river had poured into it, then the results could have been catastrophic. The danger was successfully averted, and academics believe that thanks to the protective gate, the influx of water into the mine shaft is decreasing by approximately 300 cubic centimeters per hour. A year after the disaster, it has become clear what a vast undertaking was completed in Berezniki in order to avoid a negative turn of events. Misfortune has united us all, and perhaps one more important lesson from the events of the past year is that by working together, we can overcome the elements.